Well, thank you everybody for coming. This is our annual golf summit. Our focus is really to just bring topical conversations and items for the New Jersey golf community, and I think we have a great forum today. So I'll get started. I see Mike McInerney has given me 25 minutes, which I think I will not be up here for 25 minutes to get started. So basically, what I'd like to do is start and talk a little bit about the New Jersey State Golf Association. My name is Mike McFadden. I'm the president. I started in October. I'm very proud of being involved with the association. It's a great organization. So I think probably most of you know what we do, but I'll do a very quick summary. We are effectively everything golf in New Jersey. The organization started in 1900. We basically run tournaments. We have a multitude of opportunities for all of our members, which is approximately 60,000 members in the state of New Jersey. We hold over 20 tournaments, 23, 24 tournaments with qualifiers. We do the handicapping for the state. We do the course ratings for the state, which I think a lot of people don't realize if you're not very close to the organization doing the ratings. We have, when I mentioned tournaments, we also have member golf days. So, and going back to the tournaments are a multitude for professionals, for amateurs, and we also have what we call member golf days. So member golf days where we play at some of the best courses in New Jersey for a relatively nominal fee. As long as you're a member, you can sign up to play at one of our member golf days. And then what I'm very proud of, we have our two foundations. We have our youth foundation, which provides approximately 50,000 of grants every year to needy, deserving youth organizations throughout the state. That's been going on for about 20 years. We have an annual fundraising event, which is our pro-amateur tournament, which is held on an annual basis before our state open. This year is at the Ridge at Backbrook. I'll give you the date of the pro. If I can remember, I'll ask Frank, who runs our youth committee, youth foundation. July 20th is the date of our pro-am. So our pro-am, which is our main fundraiser, like any pro-am, has 3 amateurs and a professional. You can bring a professional from your club or somebody you know, or we can assign you a professional. So if you would go to our website, sign up as a single, and we'll pair you up, or sign up as a group, even better. And again, it's at the Ridge at Backbrook, which is a great venue. So that's our youth foundation. And then the other foundation is our Caddy Scholarship Foundation. Our Caddy Scholarship Foundation started in 1947. We've given over $17 million in scholarships since that point in time. This past year alone, over $650,000 to approximately 150 caddy scholars, both men and women. We recently announced a partnership with the Evans Caddy Scholarship Foundation. The Evans is part of the Western Golf Association. They are been around since, actually longer than our Caddy Scholarship Foundation. Very prominent, very large, and they give full scholarships, and they have houses at many of the universities where they give scholarships. They had decided to expand both on the East Coast and the West Coast, where they originally were from, kind of the Midwestern states. And at the end of the day, we thought it'd be best if we combined forces. Primarily, number one reason, we could just get more opportunities for caddies for scholarships in the state. We also, besides, we're also working together to increase our caddy programs, grow our caddy programs, and most importantly, get more caddies so we can have more opportunities for scholarships. The New Jersey State Golf Association and the Evans are also going to announce relatively soon. We'll be putting a house at Rutgers, which will be our scholarship house for caddy scholarship recipients for the state of New Jersey. So we're very excited and keep an eye on that. So that's enough about the association. We're going to get into the event. I would like to introduce some of the individuals here today. From our allied associations, we have Chris Bauer, who's the executive director of the New Jersey PGA. I saw Chris somewhere. Andy Stock, the president of the Metropolitan Golf Association and a good friend of mine. Joel Moore, vice president of the New Jersey Golf Course Owners Association. And Maureen Sharples, the executive director of the Golf Course Superintendents Association of New Jersey. Our partners, who we have to thank, who do so much for our golf association in the state of New Jersey. NJM Insurance Group, Grant Caneller. From Provident Bank, Michael Petrucci. I think I didn't do that too well. Petrucci. And from Donnelly Energy, Justin Avallone, Chris Donnelly, and Karen Reyna. Last but not least, our past presidents of the NJSGA, who I have to thank on a regular basis because they have done so much for me on both a personal level as well as with the Golf Association. Bill Freeze from Essex Fells. Eric Houseknecht from Hamilton Farmers, who was our immediate past president. Jay McNeil from Plainfield, who was here, but he had something going, so he had to leave. So Jay was here. Tommy McGovern from Hackensack. And the head of our youth foundation, Frank O'Brien from Plainfield. So our topics today, I think, when Kevin and Mike, before I got into the program, I wanted to thank the staff. They're all in the back. I was going to mention the names, but I'm scared I'm going to forget a name, so I won't mention the names. With the exception of two shout-outs, Mike McInerney, who kind of really ran the show today. Mike is hopefully here somewhere. So there he is. And Kevin Purcell, our executive director, he couldn't make it today. He had a medical item. He's fine. And he is, he's an executive director for the state, and him and Mike and the rest of the team helped put this together, so kudos to all of them. So what's important around golf in New Jersey these days? We're getting into the, kind of the nuts and bolts of it, whether you're a private club, whether you're a municipal, county course, whether you're a public course, whether you're, any type of golf affiliation, there's always current events and a lot going on. We've seen a lot the last few years with COVID. We hopefully think mostly behind us. So that has been a focus, and hopefully we're going to be looking forward from that. We're going to spend some time, and I'll get, very quickly into our presenters, talking about mobile charging. So if at your club, obviously electric cars are where things are going. Or at least they were, and they've kind of slowed down, but I think they will be back soon, hopefully. It's important without knowing where your chargers are and what your club needs to do to take care of that. That will be a topic. Another hot topic, which is unfortunate, but it's life right now, is recruiting. I think I just came back from Florida, and I stopped at a kind of a fast food place on the way back. And the sign on the front door said, "Please be nice to our staff. We have very few staff because we can't find enough workers. Nobody wants to work anymore," was the sign said. But the point is, we all know how hard it is to get people. So I think we're going to, when we talk about recruiting, that's going to be prominent and important to pretty much most of the people in the room. Leadership and culture, it pretty much goes with recruiting. You obviously have to know to manage, but also how do you bring your organization in terms of maintaining a strong team, as well as supporting whatever your membership or your clients, et cetera. And then benchmarking and data. It's obviously, it always goes to say you need to understand where you stand relative to the information out there. Golfers have a lot of choices, and I think it's important that you understand what's working, what's not, what metrics are important, and what data is important. So those are the four topics we're going to cover today. The plan is to really make this interactive. So once the presenters come up, feel free, raise the hand. It's a small enough room. I think you could probably, we have a couple mics, but just ask the question and we'll turn it into, they have presentations. It's really about, what's important to you, what's on your mind, and what would you like to know. We also will have a break halfway through and a cocktail hour afterwards, so I think our presenters will also be around then, so it may be a little easier for you to catch them on the break, et cetera. But feel free to turn this into not just a presentation, but the ability to ask questions. I don't think I missed anything. So we're going to start, look at my watch, a little bit quick, with Donnelly Energy mobile charging station incentives, which I think is obviously a very important topic. Justin Avallone from Donnelly Energy. Is Justin here?
How's everybody doing today? I'm Justin Avallone. I'm the Vice President of Utility Programs at Donnelly Energy. We're a division of Donnelly Construction. So some of you may be familiar with Donnelly Construction and our reputation in the country club space. We're a family-owned firm that's been operating in New Jersey for the last 45 years. And about 12 years ago, we developed our energy division to help serve our clients through utility-based incentive programs. We've implemented over 1,000 of jobs throughout New Jersey, including many NJSGA members like Ridgewood Country Club, Somerset Hills, and many others. No, thank you. So today, we would like to talk to you about the electric vehicle charging space and the nuances of both state incentives that will help alleviate the costs associated with installing the charging stations at your clubs, as well as the challenges associated with actually installing the stations. Every building and facility is unique when it comes to the EV products and what the ideal fit is. But learning how the facility operates now, along with how you plan in the future, is pivotal in making the appropriate recommendations. And EV is not as simple as just selecting a charger to plug in. You need to take into account a variety of different things: the type of charger you may have, the electrical work required for it, whether you need to do trenching, concrete work, and paving. So with all of these trades having to go into one project, it's imperative to have one point of contact throughout that can simplify the process for you and allow for a smooth installation. So what's the best way to get started? If you're thinking about adding electric vehicle chargers to your club or facility, you want to take into account a couple of different things. One is assessing the current power supply capabilities at your facility. What kind of service do you have there currently? Are there any existing issues you might have with power constraints now? And then do you have any ability to add on additional consumption at your facility? Identifying where stations could go. I'm sure most people have ideal locations where they'd want to put charging stations in there, but there's other things that go into it in terms of how far away from an electrical supply you may be. Are there wall-mounted options? Will things have to be pole-mounted and so forth? And then a big thing is going to be cost, right? So being able to look at the available rebates that can potentially be available for you can help offset a lot of these costs and make it a more cost-effective measure for you. So each utility right now has its own individual program available, but each has its own individual guidelines to it that vary between utility to utility with that. So being able to know how to be educated with that and take advantage of the incentives there can be very important on the front end, as well as any of the grants that are available through the state too. And using these as a combination together can make it a more cost-effective venture for you. And then finally, you have to look at the hardware that's going to be best suited for you. Personally, we're agnostic in the type of material that we use when recommending to different facilities, but this allows clubs to be able to take into account what's most important to them when making the decision, whether it's an upfront cost, whether it's the performance of the actual chargers themselves, or whether it's how the software can work with their individual apps and so forth. So one of the things to take into account when you're thinking of the different chargers is being aware of the cars that are at your facility now. Realistically, there's two types of different EVs that are out there. You have plug-in hybrid EVs, which are essentially an electric vehicle that also has a gas backup. So these cars, you only get 30 to 40 miles of drive time on the electric motor themselves, but have a gas backup to them that allows you to continue to it. This is what's actually the more prevalent type of car on the market right now. So about 70% of any EV cars out there are this one now. But it's starting to go in the other direction, which is the all-electric type of vehicle. So these are what you're seeing, I'm sure now, a lot more popular, the Teslas, the new Mustangs, these Hummers and stuff like that, that are strictly all-electric cars, no gas to them at all. The sales of these electric EV cars have been doubling each year over the last 3 years, and we see them as being the future in the EV space. So having the ability to charge is going to be imperative to the owners of each of these cars. There's basically two different ways to charge these electric vehicles. You have AC charging, which is your standard power that you're going to see at most facilities, or DC charging, which can go directly into the battery themselves. But each individual car will be set up in a way where you won't have to decipher that too much, but it allows for the different options to be chosen when you get to choosing the different chargers. Now, the important part really here is the three different levels of things that you can get installed at your facility. First up is just level 1 charging. This is essentially just having plugs available for somebody to charge in a car. It's the same type of socket you'd plug it in a cell phone or anything else into. And this allows for some easy convenience to it. You might have existing sockets there already that customers can utilize. However, the effectiveness of these types of charging is very low. Somebody plugging in their car into one of these spaces is getting maybe 3 miles, 5 miles of range time from plugging in there with it. So realistically, unless you're plugging in there overnight and you're somebody who's an in-town driver, you're not going to get a lot of benefit out of a charger like that. Secondly, there's a level 2 charger. Now, these are the ones that you're going to see that are very common when it comes to residential spaces, but also you'll see at offices and places where people congregate for more than a few hours. These types of chargers, they can charge a car at a rate of between 20 to 50 miles of range per hour. So you can almost get a full charge on most vehicles in a 4 to 5 hour time frame. Now, with clubs and golf facilities, this is obviously ideal because they're one of the few types of areas where somebody's parking a car that's not at work and not at their residence, where they're actually intending to be at the place for 4 to 5 hours. So somebody can park their car, have a regular round of golf, be able to get a bite to eat, and actually leave with a fully charged car. And these chargers as well allow for several different options for the club to take advantage of the way that they're set up. They can simply be added as an extra amenity to the club, as an offer to membership or guests, where simply you're allowing open access to the chargers. You are only getting charged the rate that your utility is. The end user golfer wouldn't get charged for it, but they see it as an added benefit of coming to the course that day and being able to come to the club. The second option is you can charge it to just basically cover your costs of what you have there. So if you're getting charged 10 cents a kilowatt hour, you can charge them the slight addition to that to just cover any of the costs and monitoring fees you have. And essentially, after the time of install, the units are going to pay for themselves month over month, but you have this additional amenity to membership. And the third is it can actually be a revenue-creating item for the clubs. At a small cost, they can actually still have be market rate billed to your guests or your members, where they're paying the same amount that they would if they went to a public charger, but they're doing it at the convenience of the club. And then at a setup like this, the chargers can pay back themselves in almost a year time when you combine them with the rebates available. And after that, being able to have extra revenue for the club that can be used for other items throughout the club. So you have a lot of flexibility available with these. And as you'll see coming up, there's a lot of rebates associated with these type of chargers for clubs to be able to take advantage of. And thirdly, you have DC fast chargers. These are the type of things that you'll see on the side of a highway. You'll see them at some of the outlet malls and things like that. They're intended to be able to charge a car into 20 to 30 minutes, up to 80% of their battery. Now, that's not always the most ideal for a club, because you're going to need public access to that when a lot of clubs are private and stuff like that. But for the public clubs where somebody has easy access off a road, you could very easily put one of these in, be able to have it as a revenue generator for you. And I know if I was going to pull off and charge my car, there's worse places to be than having a driving range available or something like that for you. So it's something that I could see actually being something where people would choose that over some of the other publicly accessible fast chargers. So as I discussed, each individual utility has their own guidelines associated with it. And based on where your electrical service comes out, is going to affect the way your rebates are. But I'll briefly just go over each one so you guys can have an idea of the type of money that's actually out there for each. So, well, PSE&G is the largest utility in New Jersey, and their program is the one that's actually open and running right now. For those level 2 chargers that we discussed, they actually offer up to $7,500 a charger, up to 4 chargers. So you could potentially get $30,000 of incentive from PSE&G to pick up the labor portion of the install cost for you. This will cover anything from the meter itself up into the place where you put the charger. They'll also potentially cover up to $10,000 of any service upgrades you might need. So for a facility that maybe thinks they're having power constraints right now, you're already worried about that your panel's maxed out, PSE&G will actually come, be able to look at potentially upgrading for you, and then pick up the costs associated with it. On many of the projects that we've had, this budget that they set has more than covered the amount too. So most of the time you're going to get that full upgraded service available for it covered, and then a large portion of, if not all of the labor portion covered, leaving you only really the material cost to be covered to it. The one caveat with it though is that they want the data shared and they want the chargers available to the public. So for some clubs that's probably not in their best interest to it, but it's something that's open to it. Now, because these chargers are something that takes 4 to 5 hours to charge, it's not something where you're necessarily going to have a lot of people coming off the road to try to charge on these style chargers, but making them public for it would be a necessity for it. Next, you have Atlantic City Electric. This is another program that's already up and running now. Very similar style where they'll pick up the labor portions of it. They only pick up about $4,500 of the labor portion of it, up to 50% of those costs, but they're willing to do that for up to 10 chargers for it. And they are also open to having it be where it could be a private facility or public facility, so you'll have that flexibility. But if you are willing to make it open to the public, you could potentially see a higher percentage available for you of that $4,500 as well. Next, you have Orange and Rockland, which is covering the northern part of the state. It's a very small utility in New Jersey. Comparatively, theirs is up and running, but right now theirs is only geared towards the fast chargers. So somebody who's interested in that could take advantage of it in the Orange and Rockland space. But they're looking at adding level 2 initiatives to their program in the future, but right now they're not live or approved by the BPU at all. And then we have Jersey City Power and Light, JCP&L. Their program is not live currently, but they do have a proposal out with the BPU that's approved, and they're just putting together their back end stuff to be able to put together. They have another similar setup where they can pick up to $6,700 of the cost for each individual chargers. But with theirs, they have 2 different programs set up differently for people who are willing to make them public versus those who are willing to make it private. So for those who are public, they have up to 500 chargers that they have allocated incentive for to be able to go to right now. Anybody who wants to make it private, they only have 100 chargers allocated to that. So I would say anybody who is looking to potentially install those type of chargers in JCP&L territory, that's something where you'd want to be able to act on that sooner than later, because there is going to be a much limited fund on the JCP&L side than the others. Now, in conjunction with these, those are all going through the utilities themselves. The DEP, however, has its Drive Green program, which is also trying to push the electric vehicle initiative. As it's a big push on the state end as well. So in conjunction with the utility programs, you can actually take advantage of these Drive Green rebates and be able to get the actual hardware charger itself, portions of that cost covered as well. So throughout the state, they have up to $4,000 for level 2 chargers, as well as up to $200,000 for people who are willing to put in DC fast chargers and are in a high traffic area to them. So in some cases, if you were in a qualified spot, you can get most of the material costs picked up by the DEP program, the rest of the costs picked up by the utility rebate program. So the big thing I want to leave you guys with is, as you can see, there's a lot of variables when it comes to navigating the installation of EV chargers. With the way technology is changing and the programs are adapting daily, you want to make sure that you're prepared not just now for the short term, but also what your long-term goals are for the club. So being able to take advantage of potential rebates and things now while they're available, while also being able to be prepared for your infrastructure of your clubs for the inevitable rise in the electric vehicles space. It's important to be able to know all of the things up front that you have, and then hopefully be able to go to a one-stop shop for it to be able to get it done smoothly and efficiently. So my contact info will be out here. We'll be outside during the breaks and afterwards. And if you have any questions, we're always here to answer just generic EV questions for you guys, or anything that might be site-specific to your guys' clubs in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. I think when it comes to topical items to add to the agenda, I don't think we could have done much better in terms of what's current. So it's very important, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of questions during the break. So I would imagine in, I don't know, a decade from now, probably these chargers will be everywhere. Is that your thinking?
That's the intention right now.
That's the goal? Yep. So, well, thank you again. We're now going to, from Montclair Golf Club, Mike Campbell and Ann Cowley are going to come up and talk about recruiting. We talked about earlier in the introduction, how important it is in terms of getting staff, and not just getting staff, but retaining staff, and obviously getting and retaining, strong staff. So talk again about a topical item. This is very, very prominent. So with that, I'll hand off to Amy and Mike.
Hello, I'm Mike Campbell. I'm the Director of Golf Course Operations with the Montclair Golf Club. We were asked to come and talk about some of the things that we went through last year, specifically last year with staff retention and recruiting. So I thought that it was important to start off with really what our situation was and some of the things that we dealt with it, how we dealt with it, before we ended up bringing in Amy as our recruiter. I think it starts really with 2020. Everyone thought 2020 was the tough year. Obviously, all the uncertainty with the beginning of the pandemic was something that we were all dealing with in our personal and professional lives. For Montclair, specifically for the green department, looking back at it now, I'm pretty certain that 2021 was probably a more difficult year than 2020. Seemed like there may have been a delayed reaction to a lot of the pandemic things. We were under construction in a major master plan project that actually got off the ground in 2020. We were opening up the first phase of that in 2021, undertaking the second phase, building pools and tennis courts and paddle facilities and pretty extensive golf course renovations. And it almost seems like one day came into work and there wasn't anyone working. So, looking back, The club, Montclair, like many clubs, we have a heavy reliance on seasonal staff. You know, historically, those same people come back every spring. You know, we say goodbye to them around Thanksgiving time, Christmas time. And there's some risk in that, you know, because when, you know, I kind of call it going back into the river, but you're expecting them to come back, and you have exit interviews every year. And in 2021, they didn't come back for a variety of reasons. Some left the state of New Jersey altogether. Some didn't come home from their home countries. Many of our staff travel back home during the winter, and that's where they stay for the winter. Some of them decided to stay there. Going back to 2020, many of them communicated some level of fear of working during COVID. Some of them were frustrated by some of the COVID restrictions once we did open. They were frustrated by some of the restrictions that we put in place to try to create a safe workplace environment. And, you know, work became slower and more tedious at times. And I think there was a genuine level of fear. And some left for higher paying jobs. I think that, you know, I grew up in the golf business, and probably prior to the pandemic, you know, if you look at some of the wages and hourly wages specifically, there's not a huge difference from the late 90s to what many people are being paid in specifically the green departments, even in 2020. And, you know, when you're waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and you're going to work and stock shelves or work at Wawa for the same exact hourly rate that many golf clubs are paying, you know, it wasn't a long thought for them. So we did have some people that either left for some of our competitors or left the industry altogether. And I think that when you look at what we were dealing with as a club, it wasn't just the green department. We had a lot of people leaving the industry, the hospitality, even on the clubhouse, the food and beverage side. You know, so this was not a green department specific thing, although I think that for whatever reason we had realized it prior to the F&B department and the golf shop also. But at the end of the day, it didn't matter why they weren't there. They weren't there. And so, you know, the master plan, the normal seasonal or the normal staffing requirements that we had, we operated basically in the green department about 50% below our budgeted census. And between the construction, the census issues, everything that we were dealing with, it was just a perfect storm. It became very, very difficult. Usually some of our, you know, hiring was done by the middle of April, which kind of coincides with my busy time. So it usually isn't so difficult to manage ads and answer ads and do interviews, you know, and you've got that, you know, portion of things wrapped up before you get into opening day tournament. When that didn't happen and you were fielding interviews in May and June when the bulldozers are driving and the greens are being mowed and you're coming off the golf course and half the interviews that you're scheduling, people aren't showing up, it just becomes, just managing the ad is a whole nother job that, quite frankly, I was not prepared for. So what did we do to manage our way through the challenge? Well, obviously we leaned heavier on our existing staff. I think over time, this probably led to higher attrition in our staff because I did a pretty good job of tiring everyone out. You know, and guys and females can only work 7 days a week for so many months on end. But we really had no choice. Montclair is a huge property. The rough is still growing. No one told the grass that we didn't have any staff. So, you know, we leaned on some of our best staff. And unfortunately, you know, some of them did decide to leave just because it was a lot of work. We obviously continued to run our employment ads. And like I said before, they were pretty difficult to manage, especially as we got into the summer months. It just became more and more difficult for me to come off the golf course. I was having a hard time when the ads were responded to. I was having a hard time responding in a timely manner. By the time we did respond, many times the people that were willing to work had already found other gainful employment. And so, you know, the golf course was always taking priority. And so we were just having a hard time managing those ads. Some areas of the club were able to rely on staffing agencies to fill their needs. It's not an option that's very viable for the green department, but it is how the clubhouse got through a lot of their needs. Rental agencies, staffing agencies for temporary wait staff and banquet servers and stuff like that really did help them out. We were talking to a lot of different people, some from a couple different states away at the time, and we had a couple leads on some temporary staffing agencies for some temporary help, but none of them really panned out. We ended up bringing in a lot of high school age staff. We had a couple members. We had one specific member actually that had a very good connection with Cedar Grove, and I was very nervous about bringing in so many high school students. And it did present challenges with equipment being, certain of the high school students weren't old enough to get on the equipment. Some of them weren't old enough to come into work on certain days. But I will say that, and I'm not that old, I promise, but it did give me a refreshed sense because they had great attendance. They had great maturity, and everything that, we dealt with in the past with high school students was not the case this past year. And I told each and every one of them, and the member that brought me 15 or 16 of these kids, that if it wasn't for them, they saved my tail. So I'll forever be thankful for that group of kids that did come in. I know a lot of clubs initiated an employment referral program. We did the same, which we did have levels of success with. We had signing bonuses. Some of our best staff, if they sponsored staff and made it a certain amount of time, we paid them for bringing in those staff. And we did have a level of success, but when you're 50% down, you need a lot of success, and we just weren't having that level of success, especially in the mid-season. So the referral program was something that did work, just not enough. We also made the difficult decision from a budgetary point of view. It wasn't difficult to arrive at the decision, but we took a long, hard look at our hourly wages across the entire club. And, we brought up our hourly wages both to prospective candidates and to our current staff to what we thought was at market. And we had to make some budget decisions midstream, but we were able to do that, which did calm down our current staff and I think, made them a little bit more, accepting of the things that we were asking them to do while our staff was down. And it also opened up some doors for us with the prospective candidates and I think got us talking to people that we would not have been able to even talk to prior to that. And ultimately, I ended up outsourcing a consultant who came in and was specific for the green department area and worked with him for quite a few weeks. But again, the reality at Montclair was we were so far down, no single consultant was going to be able to fix this problem in fast enough of a time. He had other clients. He had, he had a business to run, and he wasn't just specifically looking out for Montclair. So, when I told him that I needed about 23 people, and I think after a number of weeks, I think we ended up probably getting a half a dozen out of the consultant, and he did a great job, and he worked very well with us, and it just wasn't enough not to have him in-house. So I went to the GM at the time and just said, I have a concept that I'd like to pitch to you about bringing in our own recruiter. I thought that there was something with the consultant, just, him having more responsibilities than just Montclair. Recruiting is something that's very common outside of the club industry. And so I pitched an idea that we would, basically work through the green department challenges first, because I was a little biased to that. And then if we had success at the green department, that we would take this recruiter and then, broaden her horizons and go after the entire club. And the consultant that we were working with helped me develop that. And we had a huge response to that ad. Ultimately, we hired Amy Cowley. And she'll get into her programs and her successes, but, I couldn't be more happy with the results that we've received. The difference between this April and last April, we are fully staffed now for the month of April. We did bring in more people and keep them year-round this year so that we didn't have as much of a transition from fall back to spring. But having someone that's responding to ads as soon as they're being responded to by a candidate, reaching out, getting people in, has been huge. The clubhouse is fully staffed for April levels right now. So Amy has had a huge winter and a huge spring. And the other thing that I'd like to point out before I introduce Amy is for us at Montclair, and I suspect that it's probably the same at most clubs, but this was it was something that I didn't even think about when we were going through this concept. But, golf shops place ads, interview people. If they don't work out, these people go away. Same with food and beverage, same with the green department. You have basically a couple different industries working within the club. And I don't necessarily see these candidates that the golf shop, maybe he doesn't fit front of the house working, and I don't see that candidate. What Amy's been able to do in the club environment is bring all of those candidates in that the club is generating, and being able to redeploy them, say, to other departments. We've hired a lot of people in the green department that, for whatever reason, wasn't a great fit in the kitchen or the dining staff or the golf shop, and conversely, we've had some people that weren't great fits for us that are now working in our golf shop or working in the dining room. So being able to bring that in as one club and having one person, with that umbrella looking over those things has been a benefit to the entire club. So I think, with that being said, Amy's got a lot more interesting stuff to say than I do. So Amy Cowley, she's the recruiting assistant at the Montclair Golf Club.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your time at the summit so far. Recruiting successful candidates during a pandemic has been quite increasingly difficult, as I'm sure each and every one of you have encountered at your own organizations. So according to Society for Human Resources Management, this pandemic has created what they call the Great Resignation. So with that, everybody is resigning, whether it's retiring, whether they're scared to work during the pandemic, whatever their reasoning is, it's at an increasing rate. And it is assumed that it's going to get worse before it gets better. So over this next year, we're supposed to see more increase in resignations, and then it's supposed to go back to normal. So trying to manage the ever-changing rules of the state while hiring talented candidates to fill these positions of any organization has been nearly impossible. As Michael spoke briefly, Montclair Golf Club was experiencing the same exact difficulties when hiring for positions. I was brought in to create a recruitment strategy for each individual department's needs, and while keeping the top talent coming into the organization and upholding the standards of the organization. Understanding the needs of the organization, I was able to create a strategy for recruiting and retaining that was dedicated to Montclair Golf Club and their specific needs. So first things first is creating an attractive ad. So post-pandemic job market for hospitality positions has been extremely competitive, with job openings outnumbering the amount of employees and candidates that are available to even fill them. This means candidates are scrolling through all these job ads and they're looking for ones that stand out to them. They're not going through each and every one of them. They're just going to the ones that are short, sweet, right to the point, and they're attractive. So I've seen many organizations over the last few months as my research that post generic job descriptions as their ad. So they take a job description that they have on their computer and they just post it under their ad. This creates a really, really long, drawn-out ad that many of today's candidates are just going to scroll right past. They're not going to take the time to read everything. I have found that keeping the ad short, sweet, and really straight to the point and informative in a short amount of words creates the most effective ad and most effective way of attracting candidates. I keep all of my ads for Montclair Golf Club very short, very simple, but very informative. I include, so for positions that we hire for, say for a server, I always make sure I include candidate traits that would be required for that specific position, plus only about 4 or 5 of the top job duties. So a lot of the job descriptions that I'm seeing placed as ads, they're coming up with 15 job duties, and nobody's going to read through it. So we always just keep it to the top 4 or 5, and we'll say, not limited to these, and we'll discuss more in the interview. I always include a salary range as well, or a starting salary, because candidates today, they want to know what their competitive rate is. They want to know what the organizations are hiring at. So it's really important to be as upfront with them as possible, and then they reciprocate that back. So the biggest part of the ad is actually not the job duties, not the job description, but it's boasting the organization and what you're going to do for the employee. So for Montclair Golf Club, what I do is I have a blurb of the job ad that I'm posting, the opening position. And then under it, you know, we boast benefits, cross-training, working conditions, all these things that candidates now really want to see. According to research, candidates are looking for specific benefits for a job. So they're looking for flexibility. So a lot of organizations have been able to provide work from home situations. But for the hospitality industry, obviously, we have to be on site in order to do our jobs. With that said, we can still provide them flexibility with their scheduling. So a lot of people, even if they say 1 weekend a month off, you can rotate, if you have enough staff, you can rotate through them to give them that benefit. And that is a really big benefit to people with families. Another thing is good working conditions. And in my speaking to candidates over the last several months, good working conditions isn't safety, isn't keeping them away from hazards. It's actually management. They want to feel safe within a team. They want to grow within a team. They want to feel heard. And most of all, they want the training that they feel necessary in order to go out and feel successful and confident in the position. And then, of course, the development opportunities. Most of the candidates of today are looking to see what an organization can actually give me. So what can I do? What can the organization do for my career? So it's not a job to job anymore, it's a career. And cross-training is a great one, and making sure the candidates know that promoting from within is very highly used within the organization. So where to post the ads? So once you have a really attractive ad, a really eye-catching ad, there's a bunch of different places that you're able to post them. So one of the most important factors of recruitment is getting the openings of the company posted to where candidates are actively searching. So I know most of the organizations here will post the job to their company website. And I even see that some just keep it at their website. So they post it on their website under the careers tab, and that's it. And unfortunately, with the hospitality industry and how competitive it is, the candidates of today are not actually going to websites to search out individual jobs. They have it all at the click of a button. As I'm sure if you recognize, there are hundreds of job marketplaces, job boards, and job sites available to post positions. Sites such as ZipRecruiter boast that you can pay a monthly fee, and you can post multiple jobs. This monthly fee is often really high, and then it doesn't even boost your job ad. So, for example, ZipRecruiter is about $599 a month, and then an additional $125 just to boost your ad. And that's a monthly fee that you pay whether you're actually placing ads or not. And then they also limit you to only 4 ads. So another thing with ZipRecruiter is you have to redo your research because quite often the geographical benefits and financial benefits are just not there. So the ZipRecruiter marketplace will place ads in over about 100 different sites. But in reality, most of these sites don't have anything to do with your positions. As the research that I put into it when I first got to Montclair Golf Club, the sites are actually things like nursing, sites that have no geographical benefits to the candidates around here or the organizations. Some of them I've never even heard of. So with that said, really, candidates aren't going to be looking there either. It's much easier to use job board sites. So with a job board, like Indeed, you can place an ad for free. And then you only pay a small fee to sponsor it. So this small fee actually is cost per applicant. You're getting to be able to control where your ad is seen and who is seeing it. So for instance, for me, I post for the positions on Indeed and then I sponsor the ad. So for say a server position, I can post an ad and I can sponsor it and it is only $8 an application. And what's best is the fact that you can actually decline them and you won't be charged. So within 48 hours, you can decline a resume that you've received and you will not be charged for that resume. So it's really financially cost saving. Applicant tracking systems. So having an applicant tracking system that works for your organization is extremely important to the success of the recruitment cycle. Applicant tracking systems filter the candidate's information and will store all the candidate's information under a specific job so it's easy to access. At Montclair Golf Club, our general manager, Roger Bacon, has implemented Talent Plus as their applicant tracking system. Talent Plus has been a great asset to Montclair Golf Club and is utilized by every single department within the club. Talent Plus allows us to not only to filter through candidates through the application process, but it also provides the candidates a hospitality assessment. So this assessment is not a personality assessment, it is a hospitality. So it tries to go through and see what a candidate's hospitality traits are, whether they're customer service oriented, whether they are, and their work style traits as well. So are they working within a team or would they rather work individually? So utilizing Talent Plus applicant tracking system has allowed me to filter out the candidates that do not meet the quality and standards of Montclair Golf Club and then be able to bring in the candidates that meet the standards of the organization. And these traits may not actually even be experienced within the field of the position that they are applying for. Rather, eagerness to learn and wanting to be part of a team and learn within the team. Each organization can benefit from the utilization of an applicant tracking system to organize the information for each candidate. Making first contact. So in my many months at Montclair Golf Club, I have found that being aggressive with my recruitment efforts has allowed me to really have success in the labor pool. So from October to now, we have hired 71 candidates. So we've been able to bring in and successfully hire 71 candidates since October. Understanding the candidates have their fair share of open positions to choose from, it is imperative to make the first contact extremely quickly. So for me, I always make the first contact at least within the first 12 hours, if not much, much sooner. I contact by their preferred method of communication. So in the applicant tracking system that we utilize, while they fill out the application, they actually will put the preferred contact, and most of today's candidates want text messaging. So reaching out, so if you have somebody who says text messaging and you reach out through email, they don't respond, and then you reach out through text message and 30 seconds later they're responding. So it's really important to understand the candidates of today. I contact by the preferred method of communication and then keep them engaged through the entire application process. So I filter them through Montclair Golf Club's website and through our applicant tracking system. And then the moment I actually see their application come through, I also text message them, call them, email them with their preferred contact and say, okay, let's make sure we get that assessment in. Let's make sure we get this going. And we just continue the conversation. And normally that keeps them super engaged in order to make that first contact in person. So being aggressive in my approach has allowed me to get ahead from the surrounding organizations that are hiring for the same exact positions. So making the hire. Do not let a great candidate walk out the door and tell them that you will contact them, because if you do, there are many other organizations that will scoop them up before you contact them. That's one of the most important things that I have learned over my months at Montclair Golf Club. So if you meet a candidate and they fit all of your traits, all of your needs that you want for this role, make the hire right then. Once you make the initial hire, it is important for the success of the candidate and the organization to support the new hire through the entire onboarding process. They have many questions when they first get hired, and it's important that somebody is available to answer all these questions for them and to help them through the new hire paperwork and any other onboarding processes. Making sure the candidate is placed in a position of success rather than in a position that the organization needs to fill is really important. So as Mike said, I'm able to filter. Say somebody comes in for a server position and is not right for the server position, they feel they're not right for the server position. Instead of letting this really successful, really top talent candidate go, we explore every other department and where they would feel success. This keeps the top tier candidates within the club in one aspect or another. This will also allow the candidate to see that we care about their success and not just about filling the roles. Employee referral and retainment. So once we get the top talent in, we obviously want to retain them for as long as we can have them. Employee referrals are a great way to gain talented staff. When you already have talented staff working for you, most likely their surrounding friends are probably just as like them. Building and marketing the referral program can help create a team of top talented employees. And retaining employees can be easily done with employee benefits and engagement. Benefits can include anything from cross-training, which is a huge benefit to candidates of today, goal setting, and then to the typical benefits of health, 401k. Many candidates are looking for that today. Creating an employee engagement program will create a high retention rate. Simple gestures go a long way with candidates. So for instance, I implemented a birthday card. So for the green department, we send out birthday cards at the beginning of every single month. It has a $5 Dunkin' Donut gift card. And it's super simple, and yet all of our employees are really excited and thankful when they get it. It's the small gestures that make the candidates, that make the employees want to stay and want to stay motivated. We also provide luncheons to celebrate employees throughout the summer and throughout the season. And another thing that's really great for candidates is two-way directional goal setting. So goal setting, having management sit down with the candidates, making goals for them to achieve within a certain amount of time, and then coming back with that and actually going over what has been achieved and what still needs to be achieved. They like the hands-on management, and with hands-on management, they stay motivated as well. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Question, Amy.
Sure.
For Montclair, which has obviously turned out to be a great investment for yourself and the recruiter, what would you suggest for a smaller club that may not have the funds to hire a full-time recruiter? Do they look at kind of pooling with other clubs? Do they look at
So HR recruiters sometimes will do freelance work. And that can actually get you guys through a hiring season. So freelance recruiters will get you through the major hiring season, and then it can become an easier feat for an organization to deal with the trickling of hiring. Thank you. Thank you.
That was excellent, and I think the kudos of what you've done, are showing in terms of the what's going on in Montclair. The one thing I thought of when the way to get the applicants to get back to is when I reach out to my kids, the only way I can get my grown kids is to text them too. So I guess it's just not the people looking for work. Well, that was excellent. Thank you for that. We're going to take about a 15, 20-minute break. So let's say we have coffee and some stuff to eat out there. So we'll plan on getting back here and try to get started at 4:25. Thank you. All good? We're going to get started. Was that on? Was that on? Oh, ready? We're going to get started. If everybody could take a seat. Never sure when this thing is on. Okay, thank you, everyone. So we've had two great presentations. And again, I think between just questions, during the presentation, raise your hand, or we'll have the cocktail hour and hors d'oeuvres afterwards. Feel free to reach out to the presenters. From a housekeeping perspective, we're probably going to end around 5:30, 5:45. Again, we'll have a cocktail hour and hors d'oeuvres, so hopefully you can stay and join for that. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Steve Schloss, the operating partner at Leadership Center of Excellence at Edison Partners. When it comes to leadership, inclusion in the workplace, culture, as we've talked about our prior two presentations, this is very topical. We know, things change in the world, and things like, the culture and things like inclusion, you can't spend enough time with, and it really links to our prior presentation on recruiting in terms of not only getting the right people, but maintaining and managing and having your whole organization run smoothly. So, and by the way, I should note that there is biographies of each of the presenters. It's in the guides, so I'm not reading them, but please take a read and you'll see the backgrounds of all the presenters. So, with no further ado, the impact of leadership, Steve Schloss.
Okay, does this sound good? Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. You'll notice on the screen an image of a water drop hitting the water and the ripple effect that comes from that, and the notion of the impact of leadership. That's actually an image that's on the website of my coaching practice called Listen Forward, but it also is relative to the conversation today. Everything that you do, everyone here who is a leader, the impact that you make could ripple both positively and negatively. The decisions you make, the way you treat people, the way you communicate, the way you look to the future, and even as a couple of things that Amy talked about before the break are very relevant around making an impact. And so that is very much the case today. And my name is Steve Schloss. I'm the founder and principal of Listen Forward. And also, just a brief commercial moment, Listen Forward is an executive and team coaching, advising, and facilitation practice that I started. And relevant to today, I was the chief people officer of the USGA for 8 years up through January of this year. And the story that I'm going to talk about today is the story around transforming and evolving the organization and the lessons that we learned and what can be applicable to everyone here today. A little more about my background. I've been an HR executive for 35 years. I worked in financial services, in high tech, in media and entertainment, and then in sports at the USGA. And through all of those experiences of building and scaling and transforming organizations, learned a lot of lessons along the way as well. And hopefully some of those things will come through in the conversation. So we're going to talk about the process of leading transformation through uncertainty at the USGA, and there's a couple of things. There's the opportunity that was presented, the process that we went through, the challenge that everyone here can certainly appreciate around diversity, equity, and inclusion, what we dealt with through the journey of COVID and the acceleration of change that meant for the organization, and ultimately some takeaway lessons that I think are important for everyone here as we look forward. So I was the chief people officer of a tech company called LivePerson, and we had grown the company from 80 people to 1,000 people in just about 4 years. And I spent my life living on a plane as we grew the company from 3 offices to 12 offices and had built a very successful enterprise. And I stepped off really having burnt out. And my wife and I went on a long trip. And along the way, I received a phone call about an opportunity to be the head of HR for a sports organization, but they could not tell me who it was. And ultimately, when I got home, the executive search firm presented the opportunity to me. And being a lifelong golfer and being a member of the USGA, the first question I legitimately asked was, is this a real job? And the truth is it was. And the opportunity that was being presented to me was to work hand in glove with Mike Davis and help to intentionally transform the USGA. Now, how many of you have been to the USGA campus at some point? Okay, many of you. And so if you can imagine when you pull up to the driveway of the USGA, it essentially looks like a small liberal arts college. And it ran like a small liberal arts college in ways that were less than effective when you consider the future that the organization was embarking on, especially in light of the big Fox investment, of course, that everybody knows about, but also the reality that the business, the economics, the changing demographics of sport and golf in particular were pushing hard on the USGA to figure out what does success look like in the future. And part of the journey was to take this small liberal arts college and turn it into a professionally run, business-oriented nonprofit that would be successful in the digital age. And so I joined the organization in January of 2014, and 60 days into my experience, we had our annual meeting, which that year happened to be in Pinehurst in 2014, the year of the back-to-back men's and women's open. And in closed session, I spoke to the executive committee, and I drew a big circle on a whiteboard. And what I did was I wrote the word passion, which you see, which represents about 75% of the image, and capability, which is about 25%. And I said, look, here's the challenge. This is an organization driven by passion, passion for mission, passion for rules, passion for championships, passion for history. But for us to be successful in the future, we have to look and be honest with ourselves that the capability that exists in this organization, as wonderful as the people are, and it is wonderful people, that we are lacking desperately in the capability to modernize and to look forward in a way that we can be confident about. And so my goal is to help strengthen the capability and with it increase the passion. And that's where we started the journey. So to lead a transformation of any type, there has to be a founding set of elements. And what we did was we created a 4-part transformation. The first one, talked about just before, is culture. Now, the concept of culture and its impact on any organization is not new, but primarily due to the tech industry, culture has taken on a whole new level of importance. And for the USGA, a 120-year-old organization when I joined, culture was very deep and embedded. And one of the things that I heard when I first joined was that the organization is becoming too corporate. And this is before I started. And the organization was losing its soul. The organization was no longer a family. And the reality is the organization did need to change, but we had to find a way to keep the essence of what made it who it was, but also modernize in so many other areas. And in culture, there were 2 things that mattered most. Number one is the core values of the organization. For a 120-year-old organization, there were in fact no values. There was a mission, but there were no values to guide the organization. And we spent 7 months taking the entire organization through a process to help understand what should the values of the USGA be, and to do so in a collaborative fashion. The second thing was to recognize that culture can change successfully. You just need to show people that there are ways to change it early on. My first week on the job, I went to get some coffee in the pantry. I opened the refrigerator, got a container of coffee, got a container of milk, poured the milk in the coffee, and I was greeted by an employee who helped me understand that was not my milk, that was their milk. I didn't realize that we didn't provide milk for our people. I also found out because of a group of employees that sponsored a lot of staff activities. There was a March Madness party every year, and I was thrilled to hear that. And they said, but there's one problem. I said, what's that? We've been told we cannot wear the colors of the school that we were a part of to show, support. I said, why is that? And they said, because we were told it's inappropriate. Okay? The third one is my assistant presented me a binder, which I should say is a phone book of policies that were guiding the organization. Now, I came from the tech world where the policy manual was this, and I would call it a book of suggestions as opposed to actual policies. And I realized that there were some things here in this organization that needed to change. And so at the first town hall, I got up and I described our milk policy. And the milk policy will be, there is no more milk that you are bringing in as an employee. We're going to provide you milk, we're going to provide you snacks, and we're going to provide you fresh fruit. And we're going to treat you like adults. And the same thing, we're going to actually ask you to have fun. And so please, wear the colors of the school you went to. As a matter of fact, wear it through the entire 2 weeks of the event itself. As a matter of fact, wear it any day of the year. And then the last thing is, around the policies is, you know what? 80% of the policies exist for reasons that are hard to actually understand. But as adults and as professionals, we're going to start moving away from that and begin to treat you like adults and professionals, because many things just don't require permission. The point that I'm sharing here is that the opportunity to change culture starts by words followed by action and showing the commitment to do so. The next thing we focused on were two elements: capability and workplace. So we had to recognize that there were skills that we didn't have in the organization that we needed to bring in. There were skills that we wanted to develop amongst those that were part of the organization because we really wanted to invest in ourselves. Then there are skills by giving people opportunities maybe to move into other roles in the first place. There were also some people who didn't want to develop because they were happy at what they were doing, and we had to meet them where they were. And we invested significantly in the process of functional skills, leadership skills, the skills to manage change, the skills to work together more effectively. The other side of it, however, was the workplace. How many of you were in the USGA administration building before we redid it? Okay, a number of you. So the architect who designed that building had a clear goal to create an environment where collaboration was impossible. And he did a tremendously good job. If you were to walk down the hallways, you know, there's a new show on Apple TV called Severance, which is a very dystopian view of the business world, and it's filled with hallways that go nowhere. That's what it was like in the old building. And what did we do? We had to reinvent who we were from a physical point of view, and we moved our staff out of the facility because beyond deferred maintenance, we needed to modernize the way we looked at ourselves, the way we operated, and we looked at the workplace as a key part of that journey and designed something new. But at the same time, one of the most important things we did was we recognized that the ability to create a great workplace also meant giving people greater freedom and leeway to manage their lives and not require them to be at work every day. Now, mind you, that's not easier said than done in lots of workplaces, but COVID was not the reason why we were flexible. We were flexible already 3-4 years before COVID actually hit, because we believed it was an important part of the change and transformation journey. Lastly is leadership. So the one thing I'll say is this: when I look at the executive team, and I was the person, by the way, as a matter of fact, it was 3 years today where I sat with Mike Davis in a closed session at Augusta, where we officially confirmed that Mike would be retiring at the end of 2021, where we also had a journey to go in terms of ensuring that the executive team that was leading the USGA was representative of the future in capability, in quality, in accountability. And we went on a journey to make sure that we were staffed in the right way at 2 levels of the organization. As a matter of fact, when I look at the executive team that I left behind with Mike Wan, when I look at the 6 people who make up the current executive team of the USGA, 5 of them are in roles because we either promoted to, recruited to, and took one and redesigned his role completely. And that was all with great intention, in addition to 1 person that Mike brought on after he joined July of last year. So that represented the basics of our transformation. At the same time, and most importantly here, I go to the top and the bottom of the funnel of the change that we drove inside the USGA. One is our values. Through this iterative process, the values of lead, serve, and inspire were designed by our people. And that served as the basis for recruitment, for development, for reward, for a way to hold each other accountable. But more importantly than that, we had to prepare our leaders for a new future. And we created a process called Leading with Impact. And Leading with Impact was a cohort experience of the top 25 people in the organization with the goal of helping them understand the critical elements of being agile and resilient as we as an organization were embarking on a process to think differently, respond to the changing world that we were governing and running championships and serving our members and many of you here in a future that was different than what we saw before. There's a saying that the future is not an extension of the past, was something that was forgotten about at the USGA. People tended to look at the future by bringing the past with them or as a reason not to change. And what we had to do was create a new call to action. And so what we did was we created this construct. And the construct for leaders was to learn how to be agile and resilient, both personally and helping others be so, helping others internally and externally, and thinking about this through a strategic and tactical lens. And then lastly, what we did was we focused on the most important element of agility and resilience, which was helping people understand what it means to be continuously improving what it is you do on a personal and team and organizational level. And many of you might have heard about the Baldrige process. We introduced Baldrige concepts into running the organization, but also helped people learn to be more disruptive in their thinking. And we introduced them to heads of startup companies. We introduced them to people who could arguably replace what they were doing because they had the innovation and the mindset to think differently. And the goal overall was to help us prepare for a future that we could respond to, never thinking that a pandemic was going to be showing up soon in a couple of years, but preparing for change nonetheless. So with that journey, we move forward to June 4th, 2020. June 4th, 2020 was the day that, as an executive team, we released a statement on the death of George Floyd. And as an organization, to weigh into a social issue in a world that was very much in stress at that moment in time is way out of the lane of what the USGA might have ever done before. But being an executive leader in a modern organization, the days of not having a point of view are over. You have to have a point of view, or at least you have to be willing to have a point of view and take action at the same time. And clearly, if you can only imagine as the governing body, when we both designed what we were going to say, which was literally 4 sentences, and released on Twitter and on Instagram, followed by reactions from people. You're out of your lane. You're getting into politics. Thank goodness you're saying something. We were faced with a variety of responses, but the most important lesson for us, though, in the world of diversity, equity, inclusion, in a topic for golf, which is fundamentally important just from an economic point of view, was the fact that we needed to model the point of words and action. And what you see in the say-do gap framework that is very common, think about your roles and the times that you choose to not say something and do nothing, choose to say something and do nothing, versus choosing to say something and actually make something happen. And so that was another journey for us in our transformation. What are we willing to own in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And so what we did was we focused on system change. Where do we think, as the governing body, can we make an effect for and in support of the game? And there were 4 things: board diversity, diversity of rules qualified volunteers, championship entrants, and the community, particularly through the US Open. You may not realize this, or maybe you've seen, is the next president of the USGA, starting in February next year, is Fred Perpall. He's an African-American CEO who's the head of a major construction company based in Dallas. Fred is in that role because 6 years prior to that, I began to work with the nominating committee to redesign the process to identify future board members, because the process was broken. It was focused purely on relationships and not on capability, skill, and looking into the future differently. And we put a sustainable process in place, and as part of it, if you look at the USGA Executive Committee today, it is 50% diverse. Male, female, person of color, sexual orientation, it is now half diverse, and that is all based on the intentionality of that choice. What we then did was, you might have heard about this, is we started to conduct training for the Allied Golf Association community on governance, on diversity at the board level, and ultimately providing consultation, because it is our belief, I should say it was our belief, I'm not part of the organization, was that change does begin at the top, and that includes people who are sitting at boards around the nation in the business of golf. The second thing is rules. I was in Washington with Steve Mona, who will be up next, for National Golf Day, and we happened to have a meeting with members of the Congressional Black Caucus. And they pointed to a member of the PGA Tour and said, why are there no black rules officials in golf when I see on television? Every other sport, there is diversity, why not in golf? And that was an interesting moment, because this person did not have a good answer, but it certainly made me think about what our journey is as the rules-making body to be able to respond to that question. How do we build a pipeline of diverse rules officials for the future? The third was championship entrance. You may not realize each year about 42,000 people try to compete at a USGA championship. Starting 6 years ago, we began to ask, what is the makeup of our entrants? In 2019, the last year I can speak to specifically, since 20 obviously was a different year, 35,000 of the 42,000 people self-identified. Out of the 35,000, 15.5% of them self-identified as diverse in some way. If you divide that further by men and women, by juniors and seniors, you begin to see a pattern, and we also decided that what we needed to do was to invest and focus on the 2 junior AMs and the 2 AMs to identify a future pipeline of diverse talent, and brought in someone to help us understand the customer journey. What does it mean to try to qualify for our championship being diverse? And the last area is around our anchor sites. As you've seen many times, my wonderful ex-colleague John Bodenhammer has done an extraordinary job in creating long-term agreements with the US Open and major locations. Although on April Fool's, I will give Jeff Shackelford chops for saying that the 2100 US Open at Pebble Beach will celebrate the 100th anniversary of Tiger's 15-stroke win. So the reality is, it is a long time, but the key thing is that the role of the organization to play a greater role in the community through the championships was the journey. Those things happened because of June 4th, 2020, but they speak to words and action. Now, with all that said, we were then faced with the next journey, which is COVID. The most important thing that happened in COVID for the USGA was 4 years before COVID. That was when we conducted a major risk assessment, and we realized we were not prepared financially to manage the worst of things to happen for a major championship. And so therefore, we purchased event cancellation insurance. And that event cancellation insurance had a major impact on the financial well-being of the organization for 2020 and 2021 in ways that are quite extraordinary. And that financial decision, prescient as it was, also could not have prepared for other things that you as leaders in your own organizations had to navigate. And what we had to do to navigate for ourselves, I think, offers some lessons for everyone here. So, as you can imagine, in March of 2020, we were thinking about what we're going to do as the NBA canceled the rest of its season, as Jay Monahan was holding a press conference, as the Players' Championship was under stress and he wasn't sure what to do, but pivoted and made the right decision. And we suddenly found ourselves saying, what are we going to do with our 14 championships, the services that we provide? What are we going to do about our 350 people? And ultimately, we made some choices. And one of the key choices we made was to essentially eliminate the org chart of the organization and to focus on the critical crisis work streams that we had to navigate to fulfill our obligation in ways that mattered for us to continue operation and be successful. And at the same time, one of the things that we did was we removed, being a governance organization and a technical organization to some degree, we had to focus less on being experts and recognize that we need to be great generalist leaders. We all learned something in the middle of COVID. We don't know a lot, and we have to surround ourselves with the people who do. And you're looking at the person who had to manage the entire COVID response of the organization, and I had an additional responsibility that was given to me that I would never have expected, which was to determine what's going to happen with the US Open in 2020. I can assure you, I know nothing on what it takes to run the US Open, although I certainly have been a part of it and support it. I didn't know, but I was asked to take this on. And the first thing that I did, looking around the table of my colleagues, was to ask my colleagues, I need your help. Let's find a way to make this successful, and let me lead from behind. But the key learning here is, how do you use your skills as a leader in a generalist capability and surround yourself with the right experts? The other side of change and response is, what can you do in the workplace in the midst of uncertainty? You need to listen, you need to show empathy, and ultimately you need to develop trust through transparency. At the early days of COVID, fundamentally that's what we had to do. But from there, we went into, now that we knew more, what steps do we take next? And as you all know, the organization canceled everything but 4 championships, moved the dates of 2 of the championships, the Open in September and the Women's Open in December at Champions in Houston. And the journey to do so and the process to do so accelerated in many ways what we tried to do with the Leading with Impact process. We suddenly had to learn to be nimble as an organization. We suddenly recognized the importance of speed and the ability to be decisive in ways that the organization never really thought of itself before. And the other thing we had to do was recognize that for us to be successful, we need to reframe who we are. The USGA is an organization that plans its year out, has a very clear strategy, has very clear timelines, and suddenly that got thrown all out the window. And suddenly we had to operate in an agile fashion through sprints that we operate 7, 30, and 90 days ahead, because that's all that we could control. And I recall having a conversation with a member of my team who said, you know, one of the things that I'm learning in this process is that the definition of an accomplishment right now needs to be rethought because of everything else that's going on in my life. And it was an important moment for everyone to understand as well. At the same time, we also focused again on the importance of empathy, but also outreaching to all of you and others who we were serving. And you might have heard we had created a $5 million pool to help allied golf associations because we knew the connected system we were a part of needed our help as much as you needed to help yourself. And then lastly, we were continuing to build trust by being honest and again taking action. Lastly, when I look at 2021 into 2022, the experience forces all of us, and certainly forced the executive team of the USGA, to take a review of what it means to be successful and to reconsider what the future is. And 2 things are really important. To be open to challenge the assumptions that you had on what success looked like pre-COVID, the way you run your organization, the way you make decisions, the way you structure your organization, the way you see your role in an organization needs to be reconsidered. And the second thing is reimagining work. Amy talked about it a little before, but imagine the Great Resignation being what it is. Imagine that because of the dynamics of the workplace and everything that you read about hybrid and remote and the tension of organizations asking people to come back, which, by the way, for most organizations has not been an issue because the number of people in this country who have the ability to work remotely represents barely a quarter of the working population. The reality is you have to be open to reimagine why you want to work, what work looks like, where work happens, when work happens, and you have to reconsider the workplace is different, and that is a permanent outcome. And in the process, you have to build new connection and empathy because the world is changing and people need to really feel a sense of belonging more than ever. And ultimately, the ultimate form of trust you're creating is through the process of ownership, that you're giving people even greater control of their lives and their ability to contribute more so now than ever. And that's the journey that the organization went through to get to the other side, certainly until when I stepped down end of January. And in just talking to some of my ex-colleagues, that journey certainly continues. So in summation for today, there's something I just want all of you to consider, and that is, what are your assumptions about leadership and leadership success looking forward? And there's a couple of things I just want to share with you that I think for all of you to consider and process depending upon what you're doing and how you look at the world. For you to be successful in today's world, you have to operate in the outside-in view. And what I mean by that is your organization, your facility, your club, you serve and are part of a connected system. The people who are working there, members, partners, suppliers, the community at large. How this all connects, you have to take an outside-in view. That is really important. To take an inside-out view is missing the opportunity. The second thing is culture is always important, but really the key question is how work gets done in your organization. I can assure you that the way work gets done is not top-down. It's how the value gets created across the organization, how people work effectively together and also externally. The notion of purpose, accountability, and agency, you hear the word purpose talked about a lot in business today. It is connected to a generational evolution and the value that people place on the why and the meaning that is created from their work. Do not underestimate the power of that. The same thing goes with giving accountability and then giving people the agency to make decisions on their own. If you want to increase impact and generate better revenue and grow the experience that you provide people who are working there, I can't tell you enough how important this is. It's not a new concept, but it is probably more important now than ever. Coaching as a skill, and I don't mean coaching in learning how to play the game of golf. I'm talking about being a more effective coach as a leader for your people to coach each other, is a skill set that is only growing in importance. And I can tell you, working with some clients, it is a huge deal. Developing a generalist workplace. There's a great article about the Navy a few years ago that talked about a particular warship that was successful with half the number of sailors working on the ship because they created a generalist workforce mindset, which essentially means broadening the capability of the people that you are employing and giving them chances for growth by giving them the breadth and opportunity to learn and for you to have a more multi-skilled workforce. Embracing uncertainty as opportunity. We live in a world of uncertainty. It's not a problem. It really is an opportunity. And the way you choose to reframe and reconsider the challenges that you have as ways to create new ways for change and growth is important. But as long as you look at it with a sense of discipline, that this is part of how we operate, the more successful you'll be. And the last thing I'll say today, very simply, as it says, to show up and to own up. Mental health and the well-being of each of you here and your ability to lead whatever it is you're leading is the single biggest issue that is facing organizations today. That is the health and well-being of the people that are employed by you, but more importantly is the health and well-being of yourself. You really can't show up for the people that you lead without owning up for yourself and your personal challenges, because I can assure you, everyone here has had their own challenges through COVID. Personally, your friends, professionally, we all have to recognize that to be successful in today's world is being self-reflective and understanding that what am I doing for myself? Because if I want to be there for those that are working for me, I do have to take care of myself. And I just want you to recognize that's a really important part. But the journey for the USJ overall and the story that I'm sharing with you ultimately is about things that you might be able to take from that story that could be valuable to you today. And that's it. Thank you very much. Is there anything I can answer before any question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. It really does make you reflect being part of an organization in terms of the change and the ability to adapt. And I think that was, pretty cool, especially with all the golf USGA experience. Although I must admit, when you start out with the picture, which is now down of the drop in the water, I think of my ball splashing into the water, which happens quite a bit for those who play golf with me. But thank you again. That was excellent. We're going to
It's not water, it's a penalty area.
I forgot I was talking to a USGA person here. So Eric knew that. So, and then Walter, wherever Walter is. We're going to finish with Steve Mona, Club Benchmarking, Director of Governance and Leadership. And again, I'm not talking through the bios, but you'll see the golf experience similar to Steve Schloss, tremendous in terms of the different roles in his career through different parts of the industry and the USGA. We spend a lot of time in our executive committee talking about metrics, talking about, benchmarking and governance to help us drive decisions. And I think, per the prior presentation, there's a lot more to it than just the numbers and the metrics. There's obviously the ability to step back and think on your feet general, but it's really important. So with that, I'm going to ask Steve to come up. All set? Okay.
All right, thank you, Mike. And I realize I'm the only thing standing between you and cocktails. So together we'll get through this quickly, but we'll cover a lot of ground. Okay, so let's start. Okay, very good. So for those of you that aren't familiar with club benchmarking, I guess some of you are not, let me just give you the real quick overview on how the company was founded and where it is today. So in 2009, a gentleman by the name of Ray Cronin, who was a high-tech executive in the Boston area with degrees from MIT and Harvard, joined a club. Actually, he joined a club several years before that, but he became a board member of a club called Thorny Lee Golf Club outside of Boston. And when he got onto the board, he asked the general manager for benchmarking information that he thought was pretty standard, at least in the industries that he'd been part of in the past, only to find out that that information didn't exist. And that was the genesis for the company, because after he talked to his own GM, he talked to a number of other GMs throughout the Boston area and found out the same thing was true. So today, 13 years later, there are about 1,000 clubs, all private clubs, that we do business with across the country. Mostly, the vast majority are private golf and country clubs. So that was the formation of the company. Another interesting statistic about Ray, or anecdote, is that his wife, Claire Cronin, is the current U.S. ambassador to Ireland. Claire was part of the Massachusetts legislature for a number of years and actually was Joe Biden's campaign chairman in Massachusetts and helped him win Massachusetts, and her reward was to become the ambassador to Ireland. So now a little bit about myself. Some of you may know me, but I spent 42 years in the golf industry. 35 of those, I was chief executive of 3 different organizations: the Georgia State Golf Association for 10 years, the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America for 14, and then the World Golf Foundation for 11. And by the way, I do have roots in New Jersey. I spent about 18 months or so on the staff of the USGA from 82 into about midway through 83. But the reason I tell you about my bio is not to get into all the different places I've been, but just to say that during those 35 years I was chief executive, I became a student of organizational management, and that really catapulted my involvement with club benchmarking. So let's go ahead and get into what we're going to talk about today, and really want to accomplish 3 things. I want to talk briefly about what we consider to be the key concepts of club finance. And we believe that they're rather misunderstood, so we're going to try to clarify what we and our data really makes the compelling argument are the key aspects of club finance. I'm also going to talk about a relatively new product we have, which is called the Strategic Monthly Dashboard. And then I'm going to wind up with making an offer to all the clubs about 2 different things that you could take advantage of through club benchmarking at no cost. Okay, so let's get into the key concepts of private club finance. And so, first of all, when we make these comments, and you can see on the screen what we say, we don't base this on our opinion or just anecdotal evidence from clubs that we consult with and work with. This is based on the data that we've collected over those 13 years from about 1,000 different clubs. But what we observe is this. First of all, we believe that the private club business model is generally misunderstood, which is kind of a shame because so many clubs are operating off of a model that we don't think is fully understood. We're going to provide some context, and it really comes down to there's been some data that's been missing, we believe, that really makes the case for what the model of private club finance really should be. And we're going to present that model, and then we're also going to present some common KPIs that we believe all clubs should be measuring on either a monthly or annual basis. Okay, so let's get into it. So over the years, we have developed a pretty robust database of clubs in the private club industry, and as I mentioned, about 1,000 are in our database. And based on our data, this is how the clubs array today. So about 25% of the clubs, and those are the red bucket clubs, as you'll see, are actually declining in real dollar terms over time. They have a weak balance sheet. They have a lot of deferred maintenance. They haven't really reinvested in their assets. They generally tend to operate under a don't raise my dues mindset. They get mired in operational governance. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And the members of the club view themselves as customers and not owners. And let me just take a second to try to clarify what we mean, because I'm going to use this concept a few times. So I'm guessing that most people in this room own a house. And how many of you have invested in any kind of refurbishment of your house, say in the last 10 years? So just about everybody. So why do you do that? That's a rhetorical question, but my guess is, because I've done it myself several times, you do it, first of all, you own the house, you want to improve the asset, you want to enjoy it, and then when it comes time to sell it, you want to have a better asset to sell. I think those are generally true across the board. That's what we believe the attitude of members ought to be at a private club, that they should view themselves as owners of that club, so it's their responsibility to improve that asset and grow it over time, versus customers. So let me ask you another question. So think of your favorite restaurant. Mine happens to be Capital Grill. If the general manager of the Capital Grill of Jacksonville, who I met a few times, called me up one day and said, "Hey, Steve, we're going to do a renovation at a restaurant, and you're a good customer, and we think you should pay for part of the renovation," I would tell them, "No thanks," and I wouldn't even consider it. So why wouldn't I? Well, I'm just a customer. I don't own that place. I love the restaurant. I'm very satisfied, but I'm still a customer at the end of the day. So that mindset tends to pervade, so the members view themselves as customers, which they are at one level. I'm not denying that. But because of that mindset, they're less likely and willing to reinvest in the asset. Now, in the middle, about 50% of the clubs, and those are the yellow bucket clubs, they're basically treading water. So they're basically not growing, but they're not declining. They've got, you would classify as pretty average services and amenities, pretty average balance sheet. They kind of bounce between operational and strategic governance. And their members, some view themselves as owners, some as customers. So it's a mixed bag. They're doing fine. They're not going out of business or anything, but they're not, in our judgment, achieving the promise that they could as a private club. Which leads us to the green bucket clubs, and that's 25% of the private clubs, at least in our database, which again is 1,000 clubs, plus or minus. These clubs have generally speaking, they have a full membership, they have a broad array of services and amenities, a strong balance sheet, they tend to have fresher assets, they've got adequate cash reserves, they very much focus on strategic governance, and their members view themselves as owners and not customers. And importantly, they're price makers and not price takers, and that's an important distinction. So why is it? So why would 75% of the clubs be either treading water or declining? We think it's because of a misunderstanding of the financial model, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. So let's move on. And so those of you that have spent a lot of time in private clubs probably can recognize these two views that generally tend to be indicative of two camps that tend to evolve in a lot of private clubs. One is the efficiency view, which there's nothing wrong with efficiency, but that basically manifests itself in don't raise the dues, don't lose money in F&B, we need to be efficient, and they take more of a price over value kind of approach, which we think long-term, that view is, I'm not going to say fatal, but it's harmful to the success of the club, as I'm going to point out here in a minute. On the other hand, we have the let's make this place great point of view, which is, look, I'm willing to pay for quality services and amenities, and I don't want you to become irresponsible, those who are running the club. But yes, I'm willing to invest to make this club stronger. So these people tend to have more of a value over price orientation. And so what we espouse here is boards of directors, or in, I know at least one case here, an individually owned club. When you're making decisions on which way to go as a club, if you will lean toward that value proposition versus the efficiency proposition, over time, that will be of great benefit to your club because it'll move you more into that green bucket territory. So because decisions, and Steve spoke about this, they're never that simple. They're never completely black and white. And we understand in private clubs that's most definitely the case. So it's more which way you lean will have that impact over time. And if you do that over years and a generation, that will have a significant impact on the success of your club. So here's what we call the never-ending debate. And so I asked this question about 2 weeks ago, and it just fell flat, but I'm going to ask it again today because I think I've got, so how many people here, you have to be a certain age, like my age, to know this, but how many people remember the old Miller Lite commercials? You remember those? Good, thank God, because I did a group not too long ago, nobody remembered that. So you remember the taste great, less filling kind of equation. So we have here the kind of the efficiency versus the member experience debate. So, but when we talk about efficiency, it doesn't mean that waste is okay. It doesn't mean that you should spend with abandon. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't ask questions and hard questions. But what it does mean is success over time isn't about efficiency. That's not the strategic driver. The private club model is not built on efficiency. And the best argument for that is, how many people do you know that joined a club because it was efficient? They said, I want to go join Baltusrol because that's an efficiently run club. It just doesn't happen, right? Now, you want your club to be run efficiently, and people should worry about that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that's not why people join clubs. So, but yet a lot of clubs, their whole business model is built around it, and that's why that we think, based on the data, that leads to some problems, as we'll talk about here momentarily. Okay, so this is, I mentioned a few minutes ago, let me back up actually for a second here, sorry. This one? There we go. I did want to talk about the member experience too. So what this means is that every club should strive to be the best version of itself. And I think that's the best way to put it. Clubs have a certain footprint, they have certain assets. Clubs should not strive to be something they can't be. Not everybody can be Baltusrol, for instance. Not everybody can be Pine Valley. They've got unique memberships and a unique culture. But try to be the best version that you can be of yourself. And don't let the member experience and the assets that help to fuel that and drive that decay over time. And just keep in mind, you're going to ultimately succeed or fail based on the experience that you offer. Okay, so let's move on. So remember I talked a few minutes ago about what we consider to be a path that a lot of clubs fall into, and it's not because of any overt decision that traps them in this what we call operational governance trap. So there are a lot of misconceptions, and we'll speak to them. So number one, like I said, well, this club's just not being run efficiently. Well, we ran the numbers, and we have a lot of smart people in our company that are brilliant that analyze numbers for us. And what we found was that at the average private club, about 7% of the annual spending could be attributed to efficiency. So let me state that a different way. Clubs, as you know, are high fixed cost businesses. You have fixed cost. You have a golf course and it has to be maintained. You have a clubhouse and it has to be maintained and heated and cooled. You have people on your staff and they have to be paid. You have to pay for various insurance. There are a lot of things, once you analyze it, that are fixed, that you're just going to pay that. So 7% basically you have some discretion over. So here's our view. We think somebody in your club ought to worry about that 7%. However, we don't think it should be the board of directors. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. So your GM, the key professionals, golf professional, golf course superintendent, they most definitely should be worried about the 7%, but not the board. The second one, and we hear this often, we call this the F&B trap, is that food and beverage should make money. And what happens sometimes is someone might own a restaurant or a series of restaurants and gets on the board and says, look, my restaurants are profitable, et cetera, et cetera. That's true, but in a private club environment, our data shows clearly the clubs that are, quote, profitable in F&B are actually the weakest financially, and the ones that subsidize F&B the most are the strongest financially. And so they treat F&B as an amenity. So let me just pose this question to you. You wouldn't think at a private club that you would charge your members for green fees, would you? And you wouldn't charge them to use the pool or the tennis facility or the fitness facility. And I understand F&B is a little different, but at the same time, why would you, in that one case, one place, all of a sudden decide that that needs to be a profit center? So the clubs that take the attitude, we're going to subsidize F&B to create a member experience, are the ones over time that are the most successful. And our data clearly shows that. Okay, next. Well, if we lower the dues and the initiation fees, we'll attract more members. And again, our data shows that the clubs with the highest dues and the highest initiation fees have the most members. Whoops, pardon me. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Steve. And the clubs with the lowest dues and initiation fees have the least amount of members. The next misperception is golf is enough. And this pains me because I'm an avid golfer, and I'm one of those persons that really is only interested in the golf at my club, to be candid. But what we find, and this isn't true across the board, but the golf-only clubs tend to be the weakest financially in terms of our numbers, and the clubs with the broadest amount of services and amenities tend to be the healthiest, again, based on our data. And then finally, minimal capital investment will keep our club affordable. Well, what we show pretty clearly is a lack of investment is going to lead to red bucket clubs. And then finally, and this is one we hear almost every case, our club is unique. So here's our response to that. Your club is unique. The culture of your club is unique, but the business model of your club is not. The business model of clubs are the same no matter the size and scope. And so that is where clubs get in trouble. Okay, so moving on. So I know this looks like a little bit of an eye chart. I'm going to boil this down to you. For you, but this is an important slide. So just a little bit of background. First, the average age at which an individual joins a private club is 42 years of age, okay, 42. So if you look at this chart, and I'm only going to focus on two areas. I'm going to focus on the baby boomers who are starting to cycle through your clubs and the millennials who are coming on board now. So the baby boom peaked in 1957, which happens to be the year I was born, ironically enough. So what that meant is the most amount of people were born in 1957 of any of the years during the baby boom. So what that meant is if you add 42 to that, in 1999, that represented the peak in terms of people joining clubs actuarially, right? So what that meant was basically from 2000 through 2017, the amount of people joining clubs would decline each year because fewer and fewer people were turning 42. Let's move to the millennials. The peak of the millennials was 1990, which meant the greatest number of millennials were born in 1990. So what that means is that between now and 2032, so the next 10 years, more millennials are going to turn 42 each year consecutively over the next 10 years. So that's really good news for those of you in the private club industry, because what that means is you're going to have some tailwinds for the next 10 years, because you're going to have millennials who, by the way, want to join private clubs. And that was one thing that a lot of people thought wasn't true, but they do, generally speaking. They have different wants and needs than boomers do. But generally speaking, they want to be part of private clubs. They want their families to be part of that experience. And they're going to be growing in numbers for the next 10 years, okay? So we actually think, and a lot gets said about the pandemic fueling this growth in golf, and we think that's true. But what we also think is true that doesn't get reported is the fact that more and more millennials are coming of age as well. And this definitely proves that out. In residential country clubs, I don't know how many of those are here today, but in residential country clubs, it's a different kind of business proposition. The average age that someone joins a residential country club and buys real estate is 60. So these are mostly retirement communities down in Florida where I live. They're all over the place. So what that means is we're probably going to see a decline. Well, we know we're going to see a decline in terms of people turning 60 between now and 2033 in terms of baby boomers. However, between 2033 and 2050, more millennials will turn 60 during that period of time, so you'll see growth potentially during that time. I put this up here for two reasons. I think it's interesting to look at the club business through this lens. But secondly, I'd like to make the argument, this is the sort of discussion that should be happening in a boardroom. Not, are we going to charge $3.95 or $7.95 for a grilled cheese sandwich? So, and by the way, that does get discussed sometimes. So that's what we're trying to say, that these ought to be the issues you should be talking about. Okay. Now I want to shift gears here and talk, and this is another piece where clubs often get themselves in trouble. And look, let me just say this at the outset. I should have said this earlier. A lot of people serve on boards of private clubs, and I would say 99.9% get onto a board with all good intentions, probably 100%, that they want to improve the club, they want to give back to something that's been a great experience for them. So nobody goes onto a club board with bad intentions. So that's not the issue. But we think what happens is we don't focus the board members on the things that matter most. And by virtue of that, the discussion is not on the things that will most influence the success of the club. Here's one of those areas. What we espouse is you need to think about two ledgers that drive your club. One is an operating ledger, and the other is a capital ledger. And the easiest way to think about it is this way. The operating ledger fuels the member experience. So what we like to say is it keeps the hamburgers warm, it keeps the beer cold, and it keeps the grass mowed. But it gets consumed on an annual basis. It's money in, money out. But it's fueling the experience. But it doesn't fuel what we consider to be, and I'll talk about this in just a second, the key financial outcome, which the capital ledger is what fuels that. And in a capital ledger, this is money that the club ought to be setting aside on an annual basis that helps do two things. One, it helps replace the capital assets that are being diminished and depleted every year. So every single aspect of a private club gets consumed on an annual basis. You have to rebuild greens after a certain amount of years. You have to replace an irrigation system. You have to rebuild bunkers. You have to replace the carpet. You have to replace the chairs, the tables, on and on and on it goes. And remember I said private clubs are big fixed cost business. They are. And there's a lot of fixed costs there. So if you're not putting aside money on an annual basis to pay for the depreciation, you're actually going to get yourself in a hole. And that's where a capital ledger comes in. And we'll talk in a little bit about the difference between obligatory and aspirational capital. But here's a way to think about this. So the average tenure of a club member is 20 years. That's how long a member, on average, stays a member of a club. The operating ledger is the money that should be used for that member's experience over that time, how he or she used that club over time. But in addition to that, that member should be paying for the depreciation of those assets over time, which should be manifesting itself in a capital ledger. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's an easy way to look at it. Okay, so this leads us to kind of the punchline here. And what we espouse, and our data clearly states it, is net worth over time is the most important financial metric at a private club. So that, you see the blue line there? That's actually not a line. That's the plot of 1,000 clubs that we plotted since 2006. And if you look at that, I'll just do some math here for you. Somewhere around 35% or so of clubs are actually worth less in absolute dollars today than they were in 2006. That is not a good business model, right? I think we could all agree with that. We recommend, and you can see it on the slide, that a club should be increasing its capital ledger by 3.5% per year. Now, let's set aside the inflationary world that we're living in now, because that would not do it right now. So let's just set all that aside. In fact, I read something today that was interesting. Since 1913, the CPI on average has gone up 3.1%. So, and that's in inflationary times and not. So 3.1 since what? That's 9 years? That's a pretty good indicator. So we say 3.5. Construction inflation is 3.3 per annum. So just to keep up with that, that's just slightly, the 3.5 is just slightly ahead of that. So what are the sources of this capital? Well, there's really 5. There may be more, but we know of 5. There's initiation fees. That should be flowing directly to your capital. You should not be using those to fund operations. Capital dues, if you charge capital dues. If you don't, we think you should. Assessments, those are necessary sometimes. Those should be used for capital, not operating. The sale of assets, some clubs sit on big physical plant. They can sell off assets. Not many have that luxury, but some can. And debt. And by the way, we think that debt is appropriate in certain cases. So we're not anti-debt at all. And particularly in the low interest environment that we were just in, that could be something that clubs could use with great effect. Okay, so let's talk. Okay, so these are 3 actual clubs. And in only one case, we're going to reveal what the club is. But if you look at the Red Bucket Club, unfortunately, and that's since 2006, you probably can't see that, but they've had a compound annual growth rate of negative 14.9%. So they've gone, you can see the numbers, 5-6 million down to 500-600,000. That is not a good trend line for a club, and that's an actual club. The Yellow Bucket Club basically has a compound annual growth rate of 0.4%, so they're not going down, but they're not really going up. They're basically staying level, and that's since 2008. The Green Bucket Club, I don't know how many people are familiar with Carmel Country Club. That's in Charlotte. Charlotte has 4 kind of A-list clubs in town. Carmel's one of those 4. They let us use this, by the way, but this is the best example we know of clubs that we work with, of a club that's grown purposely over time. That's a 7.8% compound annual growth rate since 2004. So if you were to go there, and I was there last October, it's fabulous. They have 36 holes. Basically everything, it's a big physical plant, but everything is fresh and up to date. And they've done that purposely. So that's a big part of it. But understanding what's the driver has allowed them to do it as well. Okay, so I talked a little bit a minute ago about this concept of obligatory versus aspirational capital. So let me just try to unpack that a little bit. So here's how we view it. So obligatory capital just replaces basically what the members consume on a year-in, year-out basis. And we think the current and even past members, so people whose time in the club is up, should pay for that, which is why it's so important to make sure that you're funding depreciation on an annual basis. Because it isn't right. Let's just say I was 20 years a member of a club, and I used the golf course for 20 years avidly, and that irrigation system's going to have to replace the year I leave the club, so the 21st year. And if you weren't charging me capital dues for depreciation, I paid exactly 0 cents for an irrigation system that allowed me to enjoy the golf course for 20 years. I don't think under any circumstance people would think that would be fair. So that's why you need to be doing that on an annual basis to make sure the people who are consuming it are paying for it. And I don't think any reasonable person would disagree with that either, by the way. Conversely, Aspirational are for things that are beyond what the current physical plan of the club offers. So maybe we're going to do a fitness center, we're going to do pickleball, we're going to do outdoor dining, we're going to do a clubhouse expansion. Those are all aspirational capital. We believe that the current members and the future members should pay for that, because they are going to be the ones to enjoy it. And by the way, the future members will do so through initiation fees, which again, we believe should go straight to the capital ledger and not be used for operations. So the way to think about this is you need to be salting away 3.5% per annum just for your obligatory capital. Now for aspirational, that's beyond the 3.5. So that's, for, again, initiation fees are a great source of that, as long as you keep it segmented. So here is what we call the hierarchy of capital priorities. These are things that you have to do as a club. And your capital ledger should fund, at minimum, the top one, which is debt service. You have to fund that. But obligatory capital, aspirational capital, and increasing your cash reserves. We get asked the question a lot, what should our cash reserves be? In our database, cash reserves are from 0 on the low, obviously, to 30% on the high end. We say anywhere 10 to 15, maybe up to 20% is a good number to have in terms of cash reserves. But that also assumes that you've got your capital reserves properly funded as well. Okay, so finally, then I'll move quickly into the second segment, because I know we're running up against time and I want to make Mike to be a prophet in terms of when we're going to finish here. But we get asked a lot, so what should KPIs be? And so this screen, and by the way, we have the presentation, which I'm sure we can make available to everybody if you'd like to keep this, but these are what we consider to be key annual KPIs. So you should be measuring these on an annual basis. There's a lot there, but these are all basically ginned out by your financial reports, or should be. And then these are the KPIs that we believe should be looked at on a monthly basis. And so who should be worried about this? Well, certainly the board of directors and the senior management of the club, and if it's an individual-owned club, obviously the ownership should be as well. Okay, so that's that piece. So I'm going to run through the next piece here quickly because we're running up against time. But the second piece I wanted to talk briefly is about a service that we've started in 2019, which we call the Strategic Monthly Dashboard, which is a free service that we provide to private clubs. So basically, what this does, it allows the senior management of the club and the board to focus on what we consider to be the key drivers of success at a private club. So this actually came to us during the Great Recession of 8 and 9, that we saw that clubs lacked data to make good business decisions during that time. So for instance, you might recall a lot of clubs decided that they were going to waive their initiation fees. They just wanted to get members in paying dues. Some who had capital dues abandoned that. Those were tough things to recover from. We understand why clubs would do that. We felt if clubs had better data, they would make better management decisions. So that was where the SMD came from. And we saw it work in real time with the effects of COVID. So basically, what we have is a product, and there are about 500 clubs across the country that are participating in this right now. So basically, you can have your data cut by geographic region. So here would be the Northeast. You can also have it cut by State Golf Association. So the New Jersey State Golf Association could have its members be part of it. And you also can become part of a peer group. We have several peer groups across the country. And by the way, I want to introduce my colleague, Ken Butler, who has among his territory New Jersey and has helped start some peer groups, including down the road in Philadelphia. And Ken will be happy to talk to you about this afterwards if you're interested. So these peer groups basically are in very finite geographic areas, like the North Shore. Chicago has one, Philadelphia does. Maybe Northern New Jersey would be a good one. I'm not here to say what they ought to be, but it can be as few as 8 clubs. So if you determine there are some clubs that kind of are in the same ballpark as you are, maybe membership dues, initiation fees, et cetera, that you really want to benchmark off of, you can do this through the SMD. And I know, for instance, Glen Ridge Country Club is doing this as we speak here in New Jersey. So here are the features. There's 6 of them. I'm just going to go through them extremely quickly here just so you can get a sense of them. The executive summary, so what we do, the person on our team that runs this, on a monthly basis will take one of the metrics and do an executive summary about it and just speak to it in more granular terms, just highlighting something that is of import. So right now, a big issue is membership wait list and initiation fees, because we're in a full membership environment. A lot of clubs, and you'll see this in a minute, have been able to raise initiation fees. They have longer wait lists. So what's going on in the marketplace? So we take on that kind of an issue in the executive summary. Okay, so membership, I think we all would agree, membership is the lifeblood of a club. So I don't think there's any argument there. One of the things, though, that we can help you understand is what is your membership churn? It may not be as pronounced right now, but every club has churn in their membership. But a lot of clubs don't look at it that way. They don't understand it. So therefore, they make less than ideal sometimes decisions based on it. So we can help identify that as an example. So here's a chart of what the report looks like. This happens to be for the Naples area. But if you look in the chart in the upper left corner, you'll see, so there's actually 4 different metrics here, or 4 different cuts, you might say. The first is your club. So you would see your club year over year or month over month, how you've changed in terms, this is actually full member equivalents here. You'd see your peer group, the geographic region, and then all clubs across the country. So you can look however you want to look at this. So as an example, our data shows, as a result of the pandemic, 70% of clubs who are in our database anyway reported that their membership increased as a result of the pandemic, if you will. 20% said flat, we didn't increase or didn't decrease, but 10% actually decreased. So it's a myth to say that every single private club benefited equally from the pandemic, as the data shows. But this is the sort of data and the insights that you would get through the SMD. Okay, the next thing is cost of belonging. And so we don't think that, at least in terms of the clubs we work with, that a lot of clubs were considering what the overall cost of belonging was to their club. They tend to look at it just strictly, what are we charging for dues, operating dues, but it involves a lot more than that. So you have operating dues. If you have capital dues, which we think you should, that would be part of it. If you have an F&B minimum spend, or if you have a level service fee that you charge, if you have a locker fee, a bag storage fee, driving range fee, handicap fee, those are all things that a member will pay on an annual basis. So we think people in management at a private club ought to know what the cost is to belong to that club on an annual basis, and that helps them understand what's going on. And we can help you capture that data historically too, so you can understand what's happening over time. Okay, I mentioned initiation fees and joining fees, which is very topical right now. So we believe that the ultimate measure of your value as a club is based on your initiation fee. That tends to say what your club can command in the open market. Your waiting fee, or fee time, if you will, your waiting list, is also another indication in terms of people that want to join your club. At the end of the day, we think the initiation fee really tells the story. So what we know also is that initiation fees, this is 2020 versus 2021, where we have full year's data. So we're 3 months into 2022, and this is holding true. But initiation fees are up about 25% year over year in terms of clubs in our database. That doesn't mean every club, but that's what we're seeing in the marketplace. And in waiting list, so here's a breakdown of that, and that's in the lower right-hand corner. Waiting lists have about doubled 2021 versus 2020, and you can see that there. And they're staying that way thus far, if not increasing further in 2022. But again, just to belabor this same point, these are things, if you know what's going on at your club, can help you and your board make better management decisions. Okay, so the finance reports, we've talked about that already. I'm going to skip ahead. We've talked pretty much ad nauseum about the importance of the capital ledger. I've said that on more than one occasion. So this shows the chart on the right in real time, compared with 4 different variables. And then you also have their non-member or non-dues revenue and then dues revenue, which are obviously also important metrics. And then finally, one of the key components of this, if you're really into evaluating data, there are actually 50 different metrics that are reported in the strategic monthly dashboard. We only show the 6 here because we think they're the most important. But if you really wanted to drill down and get granular, and maybe somebody at your club that would be important to do, you can do that. And you can also do it on any dimension. So you can do it with all clubs, you can do it with clubs in your region, you can do it with clubs if you form a peer group as well. And as I said, Ken Butler's here to answer any questions about the strategic monthly dashboard. Okay, so I'm going to finish off. So this is our offer, okay? And a lot of people will say to me, so how can you make an offer like this? And I'll tell you why in a second. But there are 2 products that we have that we are happy to make available to you at no cost. One is the net worth and balance sheet, and that's basically the first half of my presentation. Those metrics are what we present in a net worth and balance sheet. And so in order to do that, we need to get your most recent audit, and we need for you to complete a worksheet, a financial worksheet, which is pretty easy because you're generating monthly financials at your club. And we'll provide that report free of charge. And so if you're interested, Ken here can help with that. The second is the strategic monthly dashboard, which we just went through. That's an ongoing tool. And again, if you're interested, and not speaking on behalf of the New Jersey State Golf Association, but if the NJSGA were interested in creating a peer group within it, it's no cost to the association or the clubs that participate in it. And we think that's a very effective tool. So I'll just leave it there. So the answer to the question, so how can you do that, is what we find over time is that clubs that participate in either the net worth and balance sheet or the strategic monthly dashboard wind up doing other things with us as a firm. So, but I will say this, if Ray Cronin were here today, and I think he's in Ireland now, I'm not sure where he is, he might be somewhere over the Atlantic, he would say this, and this is really the mantra of our company, and that is, we want for clubs to be successful. We want to help provide information that helps clubs be successful by understanding really what drives their success and allowing their board and senior management to make better management decisions. And if we can do that, that's our contribution to the industry. And we'll worry about how successful we are or not later. So that's it. Mike, I think I got us in under the wire. Fire away.
I think your last couple slides may have answered it, but, the pandemic has grown the game. And, I think probably, certainly in this area, memberships are up, waiting lists are up.
Right.
So the question is, are boards taking their eye off the ball? Because, you're kind of the rising tide lifts all boats syndrome. So are you seeing, it sounds like hopefully not, but are you seeing that as a result? And, because obviously there will be at some point,
Yes.
the swing back.
Right.
What's your thoughts there?
Well, we are trying to caution boards about this can't last. This is not sustainable. But keep in mind, remember that slide I showed about the millennials, keeping in mind that more and more for the next 10 years through 2032, we're actually moving into the prime time when they join a club. So we think that's going to be a tailwind. So our view is be very cautious about the decisions you're making right now, but you also probably can take advantage of this time. I love the phrase, the rising tide lifts all boats. So this is the time to build up those capital reserves and get in place a good process whereby the club can sustain itself during those inevitable times where you're going to have tougher times. That's how I'd respond to that. Any other questions? Okay, great. All right. Mike, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
As a finance person by background and as a former treasurer of a couple clubs in the state, this stuff I can't get enough of. So well done. And I think it's also, when you get underneath it, some of what's in this presentation is really, it doesn't necessarily come right at people in terms of, spend more as long as, or, the capital and versus the operating expense. So it's valuable. So thank you again. When I think of I'm sure Mike, one of the team, can remember how many, I want to say approximately 200 member clubs, but I think if our member clubs, between our presentations today, and we have a lot of the individuals here, it's going to be available on our website. But when I think of our boards and our leadership at our member clubs to learn about or to hear about kind of the financial benchmarking and some of that, not just, history, but kind of the wisdom, who succeeds, who doesn't. When we talked about the culture and the empowerment, we talked about recruiting, the future of, which especially in this environment, and also starting out with where the future is going with the electric stations of charging. I mean, I think this is why we do these events. It's for our member clubs to learn. So I think I can't say enough about thanking the presenters. Again, everything will be available on the website. We obviously have the cocktails and hors d'oeuvres to keep chatting and talking, and come back to any of us on the board, or most probably as our staff, if you want to get more information, because I think this is why this information, it kind of hits home. So I want to thank all the presenters, and thank everybody for coming. And we have a great year ahead of golf. Tournaments are just going to get started. Member golf days and everything I talked about in the beginning, and so it's going to be a good year. So thank you, and we'll go grab a bite.
I saw a werewolf with a Chinese menu in his hand, walking through the streets of Soho in the rain. He was looking for the place called Lee Ho Fooks, gonna get a big dish of beef chow mein. Ahoo, werewolves of London. Ahoo. Around your kitchen door, you better not let him in. Little old